Hey guys, welcome back. Today we have a couple of projects that I want to get done. The first is going to be talking about dahlias, and I want to show you how to grow your dahlia stock by taking dahlia cuttings. It's such an easy way to grow those unicorn varieties that are hard to find, and once we get them, we want more of them. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And then if we have time, I want to check on our seedlings that we winter sowed earlier in January. So I want to see how those are doing. I've kind of peeked. They're looking pretty good. We had a couple trays that kind of fell off the table and lost those seedlings, but the other ones are looking really nice. So let's go ahead and get set up and we will jump right in. Before we get started, let's talk about what you're going to need for today's projects. First, you're going to need your dahlia that you're going to be taking cuttings from. These are ones that I have already potted up to start waking them up. We are also going to be using Clone X rooting hormone. And then you will need some potting soil if that's going to be the medium that you choose to use for your cutting. We have more dahlias that we are going to wake up in here. You will also need a seed starting tray. These are the ones I like to use. These are the 50 cell. I constantly get questions about these, but I got these at a local hydroponics store, so I can't find them online. But Bootstrap Farm, they have amazing trays that I want to try next year. So I will link down their information down below. Also, Neversink Farm has really great trays. So those are two sources for you. And then we are going to be using Root Riot. These are just plant starting cubes. These are just my favorite material to use for cuttings, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. You are also going to need a blade, or you can also use little pruners or snips like this, but something kind of small that you can get into little small areas. And then let's see, what else are you going to need? Oh, some sanitizing solutions. I'm going to be using bleach and water. You want to make sure that you're sanitizing your blade and your snips between your cuttings when we're doing this. I think that's pretty much it. So let's get set up and we will start talking about this process. All right, let's get ourselves a little bit organized here, or this is going to be a hot mess. Let's go ahead and just put this little bulb arrangement off to the side right here. And I also have some dahlias that we got at the Northwest Flower Garden Show, but we have like, I don't even know how many orders of dahlias coming in. So I don't have a ton that I have woken up that I want to take cuttings from, but I do have some here that I am pretty excited about that I want to start taking cuttings from. Now, the reason why you would take cuttings is to grow your stock. It's a really great and easy way and cost-effective way of growing your dahlia stock. Usually I'll get unicorn. So when we talk about unicorn dahlias, those are just like the rare ones. There are several, like more than I want to admit, that I bought this year that range anywhere from $35 to $45. And yes, that is really expensive, but they are hard to find varieties that I want to start growing. I'll usually buy one tuber, and usually you're limited to one depending on who you're ordering from. And then I will wake those up and start taking cuttings from them. And the great thing about cuttings is it will grow a whole new plant that very first year. And it will also produce dahlia tubers from those cuttings, which like every time I say that, I just think it's so wild that you can do that. Let's see, Singer's Hope. Do we want to take cuttings from this one? Let's say we'll put it out here just in case. So again, it's just such a great way to grow your dahlia stock. It's pretty simple once you get used to it. And I think everybody should start taking cuttings, especially again, when you're trying to grow a ton in your garden. That way you don't have to spend a ton of money everywhere. You can just go through this process, take dahlia cuttings, and you'll have a great stock of dahlias before you know it. So really, really great way to do that. Again, these are some of the dahlias that I got at the show. I bought some from Bad Birdie Blooms. I love her. She's the sweetest. We got some from Dan's Dahlias. You guys know Dan. We've done a tour at his farm, an interview with Dan, and he is amazing. I call him Farmer Dan or Dan the Man. But Dan's Dahlias, they don't sell online yet. He might be coming back online. So more on that when that time comes. And then we also have some from my good friend Ann Long from the Dahlia house. She has some really, really special varieties. So I bought these at the show as well. And then we have some others that are from my own garden that I started taking cuttings from. So that's what those are. All right, so in terms of waking up your dahlias, this is the easy part. You are going to either pot them up or you can lay them out in a tray like this. You can literally fill this up with potting soil, fill it up, and then you will lay down your tubers horizontally like this and just lay them all out next to each other and put them in a warm room where they're going to start sprouting. Now these don't need light to start sprouting, but once we take our cuttings, we will be putting them under our grow lights in our seed starting room. So you would just do it this way. Now, of course, I don't want to mix these up because these are not labeled on the actual tuber. So let's put these back in their designated bags. But that is one way of doing it. The other way of doing this, which is what I like to do, is potting them up in these little 4-inch containers. So to begin, I am just going to fill up my little 4-inch container, and I am going to be planting out these tubers. Now, some of them are quite large, so you might want to have something that's a little bit deeper, but I don't mind that these stick out a little bit, that their necks stick out a little bit. That's perfectly fine. But I'm going to try to get this as deep as I can. And that is another reason why laying them kind of flat in a tray is a good idea as well. It works both ways. You just want to make sure that these are not going to dry out. You don't need the soil to be soaking wet. I do make sure it stays nice and moist, but you don't want to water these in because that could cause rot before these have had a chance to really start growing and sprouting. This is Nadia Ruth, and it is a beautiful lacinated pink dahlia, like a buttercream pink dahlia. And you can also put the date, that way you can kind of keep track of how long it's taking for them to start sprouting. It does take a few weeks, so you kind of have to be patient, but once they start growing, it happens pretty quickly. So this one's funny because it has this little offshoot here. So this one I actually might need to find a deeper container for. So we'll pop that one back in the bag for now. And let's do Creamy. This is a beautiful dahlia. It's just like a, I think it's a ball variety or maybe a decorative. I can't remember. But it's just got these beautiful cream flowers. It's so perfect if you're looking for something that's a little bit lighter, a little bit more softer. This is a good one. She's a chunky little tuber. So we're just gonna tuck her in here like this. And let's label. We'll label and date it. So we have that one there. And then let's see, who do we want to do? Let's do Cafe de Paris. This is a beautiful dahlia, and I lost it not last year, but the year before, when we had our freeze. But look at that beautiful tuber, and look, it's already sprouting, which makes me so happy. I love dahlias. As you guys know, I get so excited about anything dahlia related. So we'll just pot this up as well. Cafe de Paris looks a little bit like Cafe au lait, but the form is different. And it's a really beautiful dahlia. I forget what type of form it is. It must be a decorative. But anyways, it's a really gorgeous, gorgeous dahlia. This one here, this is called Octopus Sparkle. And this is a new variety to me. It's a anemone. I don't know if you guys can see that in the picture. It's not a great visual representation of it, but I'm very excited about this dahlia. Now this is a little clump, which if you do get something like this, it's best to divide them. You can just pre-sprout it as a little clump, but I haven't done that. I probably wouldn't do that. So I'm just gonna cut these little broken attachments. All of these little tubers have broken necks, which is fine because it's a little clump that you're working with here, not a single tuber. And look, I'm getting 2 out of this clump, which I love when that happens. So I still have this one that has a little eye popping out. Oh, there's several eyes in here actually, so I'm not worried about this one. But you can see it has several little eyes. It's probably going to be a little bit difficult to see over the camera. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one for cuttings, and then the other little clump I will store and plant this out. Now, like I mentioned, these will produce tubers their first year. They're not going to be as vigorous. I mean, they can be, as like planting out a whole tuber, but that's okay because you're still going to get quite a bit of tuber production if you are able to do this successfully. I know we've had several from last year that we took cuttings from, and I dug them up and they had massive, massive tubers, and I was really, really happy with it. These are just like little extra appendages that nothing's gonna grow from them. So I'm just gonna discard these. So put that aside. Remember, for a dahlia to be viable, it has to have the body, the neck, and the growth point, which is by far the most important part. And we've done so many videos on dividing that you guys can reference. I really get down to the nitty-gritty of dividing and show you some really cool examples of how to divide dahlias. All right, so we'll stop here as far as potting some of these up. Again, I just want to wait to see what other varieties are coming in because I don't need to take cuttings from every single variety. There's just special ones that I really want to grow our inventory. So you can see some of these other ones I have potted up and they're not doing anything yet, but I do see some growth coming out. So for example, Caligayan, and I put 2 in there because they were so tiny, and you can see those very little tips, those little swellings there are the eyes that are about to sprout. So this one was planted last month, and it's been probably a couple weeks, so this one's taking a little bit long to do anything. So now these will go back into our seed starting room. That's just where I like to keep all of our seedlings and our dahlias that we're waking up. I will wait for them to sprout and then we will start taking cuttings from them. So here is one that has done a really good job at growing, and this is a little bit big. I usually like to take them when they're a little bit smaller, but that's okay. This is Bloomquest Tory P, and it is a gorgeous, gorgeous dahlia. I definitely want to have more. So there are 2 sprouts, meaning that there were 2 growth points, 2 eyes that sprouted, and now we're going to take cuttings from both of them. For this, you are going to need your seed starting tray, and you will need a bottom tray. Now, one thing you need to remember is whatever rooting hormone you're using, you want to make sure that you put it out onto a separate container, like a plate or a little cup, whatever it is that you have, because you don't want to contaminate your rooting hormone. I see people dipping their cuttings directly into the container, and that just drives me so crazy, especially from a science background. I used to run a research lab, and when I see things like that, I just like, I cringe. So try not to do that. Okay, we are going to come in with our blade and we are going to be cutting as close to the actual tuber as we can to make sure we get that tissue. You don't need to cut parts of the tuber, and you can actually just twist these off, and I'll show you how to do that as well. But this is just going to require us to cut very close to that tuber. So basically where that growth meets the actual tuber. Now you can use an X-Acto knife. That's what I like to use, but I cannot find mine. So I am just going to use this here. I'm going to make that cut just like that. I'll just put it on my plate here. So you can see we made that cut, and right next to it, you're going to see another little eye popping out. In fact, once this starts to heal, you're going to see several little eyes around that cut sprout. And that's what you're supposed to see. So don't get worried if you start seeing a bunch of little shoots. That is exactly what should happen. Now, the other method of doing this is just by pulling it off. And you want to do this very gently, and it does take a little bit of practice. And you're just going to kind of wiggle that back and forth, kind of like in a circular motion. Just very gently. All right, just like this. So you can see we just gently pull that off. That's what that is going to look like. All right, now we are going to be using these Root Riot cubes. Now these are going to be great if you're new to this. This is kind of like a dummy-proof way of doing it. It's really easy to use. You can buy them online. I get mine online through Amazon. They come in and they're a little bit moist, but what I like to do is actually get them a little bit more wet. I just found that helped a lot last year, so I'm going to be doing that. Now you don't have to use these. There are a lot of other mediums that you can use, which I will link down below for you guys in the description box. However, this is just my preferred way of doing it. You can even do it with potting soil with a little bit of vermiculite. A lot of growers do that. I just find this to be, again, super easy. There's no mixing of any soil and the vermiculite. It's just kind of safe proof for me. If you're going to be using vermiculite with the soil mix, you would just fill up your seed starting trays just like we do every time we start our seeds. And then you would do the same steps that I'm going to show you right now and put them in there as you would with these. The great thing about these is they fit right into our seed starting trays. So it just makes it super, super, super easy and convenient. So that's what I like to do. And we have 2 here. So let's start out with these 2. Now, like I said, I want to get these a little bit wet because they are a little bit dry. They're moist, but I like them to be a little bit more wet. And then they come with these little holes in the center already. But what I do is I make that hole a little bit bigger and I just kind of go through. And the reason why I do this is because when we put our cuttings in here, I don't want the rooting hormone to be scraped off as we're pushing it through. So that is why I like to make these holes a little bit bigger. And you really want your cutting to make contact with the bottom so it can uptake water as it starts to grow. And now what we're going to do is remove some of these bottom leaves because I want these to be planted a little bit deeper. I usually take these cuttings when, oh gosh, they're about half this size. I'll pop up some pictures for you guys to see. But anyway, so what I like to do is just remove that because we want these 2 nodes to make their way down to the bottom and we're going to see shoots and roots coming out of here. So what we do is I just dip our cutting in here and go ahead and just get them in there as best as you can, just like that. And then what I'll do is just cut some of these leaves. You can cut them in half like this because that will help with some of the stress that they just underwent. And it also helps with transpiration. As your plants uptake water, they will transpire that water through their leaves. So by cutting the leaves or reducing the leaf area on our dahlia cuttings, it will help minimize the water loss through transpiration, ensuring that the cutting stays hydrated and has a better chance of surviving. So now that we've taken our cuttings, I will just go ahead and put this dahlia back with the other ones and it will go back into our seed starting room. Now these cuttings will go under our grow lights just like our seedlings, and you can cover them with a humidity dome. However, I actually found not using a humidity dome worked really well for me. We have pretty good humidity in the seed starting room, so I actually don't have to use the humidity dome, which is really nice. But if you have an area that's super, super dry, then that might be beneficial to you. I want to go ahead and label these so we don't forget what varieties we're growing over here. Now, once you do this, you are going to see that they're going to wilt a little bit. That's normal. So you do want to keep these nice and moist, and you can either bottom water, or what I like to do is just come in with a little watering can and just water around that root riot. Again, we don't want the root riot or whatever medium you're using to dry out because they're going to start actively putting on growth and those roots are going to need water. So in a couple of weeks, you can actually lift these out and you are going to see little white roots popping up everywhere. Now, once we start seeing those roots, that's when I come in and I take them out of here and I transplant them into a 4-inch container. So again, we're just going to fill up a 4-inch container with potting soil. We're not going to remove them from the root riot. We're just going to plop it straight in there like this. And then they will stay in the seed starting room until we are ready to harden them off, until we're starting to transition them outdoors. So again, I follow the same steps as I do For our seedlings, I will bring them out a couple of hours the first time, and then the next day I'll bring them out a little bit longer until they're fully acclimated to the outdoors, and then we will plant that cutting directly into our garden bed. Now, like I mentioned, your dahlias will take a couple of weeks to wake up. Sometimes they take a little bit longer. I've had ones that took over a month to wake up. Some wake up relatively fast, others take a little bit longer, but it's okay because I just keep my eye on them, and once they start growing, they really start going for it. And once you take that cutting, that new growth tends to be a little bit faster, which is really nice. Now, again, I'll make sure to keep these nice and moist. Of course, you don't need to water these in every day, but you do want to make sure that the soil is nice and moist for them. And once they start actively growing, you'll see that they'll require a little bit more water. So just keep an eye out on your dahlias to make sure they're not drying out, because that will also prolong how long it takes for them to wake up. Now, you're probably wondering, how many dahlia cuttings can I take from a tuber? And I like to stick around the 5 to 7 range. I usually try not to take more than 7 cuttings per mother tuber. I've seen other growers take upwards of 20 or more. I probably wouldn't do that, especially if I plan on taking these out and planting them out in my garden. If I was gonna plant them in my garden, I wouldn't mind. I would never sell a tuber that I took a lot of cuttings from, because you're kind of depleting it a little bit. So that's just like my idea in my mind. So I try to stick around that 5 to 7. Sometimes I'll go 10, just depending how productive they are. Last year, we took a lot of cuttings. We took a lot of cafe au lait cuttings too. And we were able to give all of our friends and family cafe au lait, which is, you guys know, one of my favorite dahlias. But there's a lot of really cool varieties that I am getting this year that I am definitely going to be taking cuttings from. We also grew Venus, which is like the hottest dahlia right now. Everybody's talking about Venus. And I'm going to be taking a lot of cuttings from that one too. So we still have a couple of clumps in the dahlia beds that I'm going to dig up. But once I dig them up, I'm going to divide them, and then I will pot those up to start waking them up as well and start taking cuttings from Venus, because I know a lot of people want to get their hands on it. So if I have a ton, I'll make sure to let you guys know on our Instagram. And if you guys want to, if you're local and you want to buy some, I'll make sure to just put that out there if you're interested, which would be really exciting. Just a few takeaways. You want to make sure that you're sanitizing your snips or your blade, whatever you're using to take those cuttings. Or if you're going to be doing the pull method, just make sure you're being kind of gentle. Make sure that you don't allow your medium to dry out. So for us, it's going to be these root riot cubes. I'll make sure to keep them nice and moist. In terms of the rooting hormone, you can use it or you can skip that step. I found that rooting hormone helps them root quicker. In fact, last year I did a little experiment where I took 10 cuttings, I put them in the root riot cubes. I did everything the same, except those 10 did not get any of the rooting hormone, and they did eventually root. It just took a little bit longer. So is it completely necessary? Not really, but does it help? I think it does. So I always like to use this Clone X. This is my favorite one. There's a powdered one that you can get too, but I've just been so used to the Clone X, it works really well for us. And I'll make sure to link this down below for you guys. But again, do not dip your cuttings in the container. Go ahead and pour some out and then dip your cuttings in that secondary container with that rooting hormone, but do not go into the direct container because you will contaminate it. One other quick note, I do not fertilize these dahlia cuttings until I've potted them up into the 4-inch containers and they have good roots. That's when I start fertilizing. And one other quick secret that I have for you is when you are potting these up into their little 4-inch containers with that potting soil, I will come in with a little bit of biotone, just like the smallest little pinch in here. Mix that in because the biotone will help with the root growth. So that is also like my secret weapon that I don't tell everybody, but I'm telling you guys because I love you. That really gets those roots growing really well. You don't need to use a ton, but just a little bit, because again, it has that mycorrhiza and that is going to help with root growth. So that is like my secret little tip that I'm sharing out with you guys. All right, I think that's it in terms of our dahlia cuttings. Let's go ahead and leave checking on our seeds that we winter sowed for another day, just because it's starting to rain quite a bit. So I'm gonna leave that project for another day. Anyways, I hope you guys learned something new today in terms of dahlia cuttings. I would love to know down below if you guys take cuttings from your dahlias and what that process is like for you, and what challenges or what success have you had doing this. I am really looking forward to getting some of our orders. We have some really, really cool varieties coming in that I am like so giddy about. So anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today in my garden, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.